Hi guys, this is Erica from Gokce Capital. Now before I begin, be sure to click subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Alfredo Gonzalez was deep in the remote reaches of Mexico's Copper Canyon when he spotted a speck walking along the steep canyon wall. That must be a goat, thought Alfredo. But when he looked closer, he found an animal much closer to home. It was a cow climbing the cliff face. We'll learn more about the remarkable Criollo at the end of this video. But first, if you plan to homestead in the Southwest, you will engage in desert farming. And in today's video, we have the top things you should know. Number 1. What is desert farming? Desert farming is the practice of developing agriculture in deserts. Number 2. Where is contemporary desert farming performed? The regions of the Middle East and North Africa are prime examples of growing nations that exist in the desert. So it's not surprising that Israel is one of the top modern countries that has pioneered techniques for desert farming. However, it may surprise you to know that the US is also a top practitioner of desert farming, with the Imperial Valley in California as one of the best examples, and Australia, which is both a vast and arid nation, but which still has agriculture as a staple of its economy. Number 3. What type of results does desert farming create? Well, because desert farming opens up additional land for cultivation, it increases overall productivity. It also improves the livelihood resilience of families, farmers, and fragile communities, creates flexible and sustainable agriculture, water, and land management systems, promotes intercropping, which is the practice of crops and trees being grown together to create shade and windbreaks for better microclimate conditions, protects and enriches the soil, combines heat-resistant crops like sorghum and barley with water-saving strategies, and promotes solar power. And number 4, as you may imagine, one of the biggest issues with desert farming is water. So what irrigation technologies are used to promote desert farming? First is water reuse, also known as water recycling or water reclamation. This process reclaims water from a variety of sources and then treats it so it can be used for beneficial purposes. Desalinization, which is the process of removing salt from seawater. It is increasingly being used around the world, especially in the Middle East, to provide people with fresh water. Drip irrigation, which is one of the best technologies invented for desert farming. There are 2 methods for drip irrigation, the first being drip emitters, which release water in a slow and steady fashion, typically at the roots of the plant. The second version of drip irrigation uses a hose that has drip emitters built into it. This is called trickle tape. And finally, there are a number of startups that are creating new technologies for irrigation in arid climates, such as hydrogels and liquid nanoclays. But it's not just irrigation that science is revolutionizing in the name of desert farming. It's the cows, too. Although revolutionizing is perhaps not the right word for what Alfredo Gonzalez is doing at the Jornada Experimental Range near Las Cruces, New Mexico. For Alfredo doesn't seek to breed a new kind of cow, but rather bring back the ancient, hardy Criollo, which can not only thrive in the desert, but apparently climb cliffs as well. The Criollo cow came to North America just a split second after the first Europeans. Arriving on Columbus's second voyage, the animals spread from the tip of Tierra del Fuego to the northern Rockies and were introduced to the American Southwest in the 1500s, where they were adopted by nearly all of the peoples in the region and eventually gave birth to the Texas Longhorn. Leggy, bony, and unusually small, the Criollo were phased out in favor of the larger, meatier, and less resilient Angus and Hereford breeds with the dawn of the industrialized meat industry. These British breeds produced more meat more quickly, but they also required a lot more food. And by the 1950s, unsustainable stocking rates had ravaged the grasslands of the Southwest, transforming much of the area into a wasteland of mesquite and creosote. Which is why Alfredo Gonzalez was in the hot Mexican desert in 2001, rounding up cattle. He had been hired by Jornada livestock researcher Ed Fredrickson to find pure-blood Criollos and bring them back to the United States. For Ed was convinced that the combination of land degradation, climate change, and rising fuel and feed costs would very soon become too much for the southwestern ranchers he served. He wanted to find an animal that would tolerate greater heat, eat less, and move more to minimize overgrazing of scarce native grasses, and the Criollo fit the bill. However, a purebred Criollo is also rare these days. Ed could only uncover one available population with unpolluted genetics, so Alfredo trucked down to the Sierra Madre to buy cows from the Tarahumara Indians. "We knew these were the animals we wanted," Alfredo said, "when we saw them within people's yards and houses. Docile cattle are more productive." He selected and purchased 30 cows and 3 bulls and drove them 2 or 3 at a time in a jeep with no brakes to the village of Timores, where he loaded them onto train cars and accompanied them to Chihuahua. Adding in time for disease testing, bureaucracy, and corruption, it took about a year to get the first Criollos to Jornada. But now, the range has a thriving herd of over 300. And demand for the Criollos is growing as more and more local ranchers experiment with the resilient bovines. Though each Criollo will sell for less than standard breeds, they may ultimately be more profitable in desert climates since their overhead costs are far lower than traditional cattle. Plus, their meat is supposed to be fabulous. "It's incredibly tender, and you can kind of taste the grass in it," says Chef David Smith, or mesquite and prickly pear, as the case may be. So, when you go to buy your own cows, perhaps consider the Criollo. But do you have any stories about desert farming? Let us know in the comments. Did you like this video? You're going to love our Gokce Land Due Diligence program. We'll make you a land due diligence expert in just 7 days. Check it out at gokcecapital.com/glad. And while you're at our website, don't forget to explore our $1 down listings at gokcecapital.com/listings. Finally, don't hesitate to reach out. You can email, call, or text, and we will respond as soon as possible. So thank you for listening, and more to come.